What would you do if your dad used a baseball bat to smash your 17-year-old daughter's Honda Civic? My daughter had to go through that terrible situation. Why did he do that? Did my daughter do something wrong? Let's follow this story together. This is a story that proves the saying, favoritism can push us into wrong decisions. Before getting into the story details, let me say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for taking your precious time to follow this story. Hello, everyone. I'm David, 45 years old, currently living in a 3-bedroom house with my daughter. Her name's Teresa. She's a freshman at a college near where we live. My wife died in 2015. Teresa had just turned 8 then. Since that day, I've been both father and mother, raising and caring for my daughter on my own. The past 10 years haven't been easy, but seeing Teresa grow up healthy and mature, I feel like every sacrifice was worth it. The story I'm sharing with you today occurred in August 2024. Even though it's been over a year, I still can't forgive what my parents and my brother did to my daughter. That day was a typical Sunday. A few days before, I'd taken on extra work, so I had to work online even though it was my day off. That morning, Teresa walked into my office with a bright smile. My daughter was 17 then, in her last days of summer break before the new school year began. My daughter sat down next to my desk and asked me with a hopeful voice, "Dad, do you want to come visit Grandpa and Grandma with me today?" I looked up from my computer screen into my child's clear eyes. My heart sank at having to say no, but work was really overwhelming. I put my hand on her shoulder and said with a voice full of regret, "I'm sorry, honey. I have to finish this urgent project today. Can you go by yourself?" Teresa nodded, not showing any disappointment at all. My daughter always understood and was considerate about my work. My parents' house was about 30 miles from our place, and the drive was pretty easy, so I felt comfortable letting Teresa drive there alone. My dad turned 70 last year, and my mom is 68. I always supported my daughter when she wanted to show care for her grandparents. After I declined to go with her, Teresa drove her red Honda Civic to visit her grandparents. This car was a gift I'd given my daughter exactly 1 week earlier, on her 17th birthday. I'd been saving up for 2 years to buy that car, and the moment I saw the joy in her eyes when she got the gift was one of the happiest moments of my life. I thought my daughter and my parents would have a wonderful weekend together, but I was wrong, completely wrong. Around 11 in the morning, when I was still focused on my computer screen, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. I glanced at the screen and saw my daughter's name pop up. Immediately, an indescribable unease rose inside me. The moment I pressed answer, Teresa's sobbing voice rang in my ear, making my heart feel like it was being squeezed. My daughter was crying and telling me, "Dad, come to Grandpa and Grandma's house right now. They destroyed my car." What my daughter said made me freeze. I almost shouted, "What? Say that again?" Teresa's shaky voice came back through the phone. "Grandpa and Grandma just smashed my car, Dad." Rage flared up inside me like a fire. I tried to control my voice and asked my daughter, "Teresa, have you called 911 yet?" My daughter replied with a panicked voice, "Not yet, Dad. I was too scared, so I called you first." I didn't hesitate to tell her right away, "Call 911. I'll be there right now." As soon as I finished speaking, I heard my dad's voice from the other side, his tone harsh as he asked my daughter, "Teresa, what are you doing? Who are you calling?" Right after that, another familiar voice spoke up. "Maybe Teresa's calling the cops, Grandpa. You should take her phone away." The person who just spoke was Isaac, Mario's 14-year-old son, my brother, my parents' golden grandson. After that comment, I heard my daughter almost scream in desperation, "No, you don't have the right to take my phone. Dad, Grandpa's taking my phone." A few seconds later, the signal cut off suddenly. I called back 2 more times, but only heard the ringing echo hopelessly. No one answered. Without hesitation, I grabbed my keys and rushed out to my car. My daughter was in danger, and I needed to get to my parents' house as soon as possible. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about work anymore, and I wasn't thinking about deadlines. I was only thinking about Teresa, my only daughter, the person I'd sworn to protect at any cost since the day my wife died. The drive to my parents' house was only 30 miles, but I'd never felt it was so long. I drove at the maximum speed allowed, Sitting behind the wheel, Isaac's voice kept echoing in my head with that malicious comment. Maybe Teresa's calling the cops. Grandpa, you should take her phone away. That comment of his made me remember what had happened 1 week earlier. August 2nd, 2024, was my daughter's birthday. That day, I'd prepared a big surprise gift for Teresa, a gift I knew she'd be pleased to receive. I'd invited my parents and my brother Mario's family to the party. Besides them, there were some lovely neighbors and a few of Teresa's close friends. Approximately 15 people attended the party at my house that day. The party started normally. Everyone chatted happily, ate, drank, and laughed. Halfway through the party, something big and unexpected happened. An elegant man rang the doorbell and said he wanted to see Teresa. The man introduced himself as an employee from a car showroom and said he had a gift for my daughter. Right after that, the cover cloth was pulled away, revealing a red 2018 Honda Civic parked right in front of the house. Cheers rang out from the crowd. Teresa stood frozen, her eyes wide open, not believing what she was seeing. My daughter turned to ask the car salesman with a trembling voice, "Who gave me this car?" The salesman smiled and answered right away, "Your dad, the man who loves you most in this world." When she found out the giver was me, Teresa rushed over and hugged me tight. My daughter hugged me, saying through tears of joy, "Thank you, Dad. Thank you so much." Friends and neighbors all congratulated Teresa. They surrounded the car, admiring and praising it. That was one of the happiest moments of my life. However, at that party, 5 faces weren't happy at all. Those were my parents and Mario's family. They stood separate from the crowd, with looks I couldn't read. While everyone was congratulating Teresa, my dad looked at the car and made a loaded comment. "It would be nice if Isaac had one too." Mom nodded in agreement and said along, "That's right." Mario smirked, his voice full of sarcasm. What a waste to buy a car for a kid who's only 17. Meanwhile, Isaac looked at Teresa with slightly envious eyes and said with a longing voice, "I wish I had a car like that, too." Hearing that, Dad turned to pat Isaac's shoulder and said with a confident voice, "As soon as you get your license, I'll buy you the newest one." Hearing their words that day, I was genuinely angry. Why couldn't they be happy for Teresa? Why did they have to turn everything into a comparison? But I held back, not wanting to make my daughter's birthday a terrible experience. At that time, I had no idea that the car I gave my daughter was the cause that led to a family tragedy just 1 week later. On the drive to my parents' house, I was sure Isaac was involved in this. After 20 minutes of tense driving, I finally arrived at my parents' house. When I got there, my daughter Teresa was sitting alone in front of the porch. As soon as she saw my car, Teresa ran out and hugged me tight the moment I got out of the vehicle. My daughter hugged me while crying, her voice choking. "Dad, I was so scared. Grandpa and Grandma took my keys, then gave my car to Isaac to drive. Isaac crashed it into the trash can, breaking the right headlight. When I confronted them, Grandpa and Grandma smashed my car and took my phone." After what my daughter told me, I slowly looked up into my parents' yard. The red Honda Civic was lying in a corner of the yard. Its glass was shattered, body dented and warped, deep gouges like open wounds on a living creature's body. Rage flared up inside me like a volcano. I let go of my daughter, walked firmly up to the porch, and rang the doorbell continuously. My parents were holed up inside the house at that point. They deliberately ignored all my demands. The doorbell rang shrilly, but no one opened the door. After almost 3 minutes of waiting in vain, I went back to my daughter, took out my phone, handed it to her and said, "Call 911 for me." After saying that, I walked to my car, opened the trunk, and took out a hammer. I'd bought this hammer for home repairs, but today it would serve a different purpose. I walked straight up to the porch, raised the hammer and shouted, "If you don't open the door, I'll break it down." A few seconds of tense silence passed. No one answered. Couldn't hold back anymore. I raised the hammer and struck the door of my parents' house with forceful blows. Each hammer blow was a sharp, crisp sound, tearing through the afternoon silence. When I just hit 5 times, my dad's voice rang out from inside, his tone somewhat panicked. "That's enough. Stop it." I stopped at his request. The door opened right after that. Dad stood facing me, his face tense. Behind him were Mom and Isaac, their golden grandson. Mom looked worried, but Isaac stood there with a defiant expression. Before I could say anything, Dad shouted with a voice full of rage. "What do you two want?" With the hammer in my hand and a face showing no emotion, I raised the hammer in front of them and said through gritted teeth, "Be careful, or I'll put you in the hospital for a long time." Mom stepped in at this point, her voice trying to sound gentle. "David, calm down, we can talk." Dad immediately said, "That's right, whatever it is, let's be calm." Ignoring their fake advice, I shouted, "Why did you smash my daughter's car? Explain." Mom then gently told me, "No, we didn't smash Teresa's car. Teresa damaged her own car." Mom's blatant lies made me even angrier. They were framing my daughter. I raised the hammer high and shouted, "You're still framing my daughter?" In 1 second, when I wasn't paying attention, Dad lunged at me and grabbed me tight. Mom saw this and rushed over as well. They pushed me down on the porch. My back slammed hard onto the wooden floor, pain spreading through my body. Dad shouted, "Isaac, take his hammer, hurry up." Isaac immediately followed his orders. He ran over and grabbed the hammer from my hand. Teresa saw me being restrained by them at this point. My daughter rushed over and shouted, "Let go of my dad. You let go of my dad." As soon as Teresa ran close to where I was, Isaac stood blocking her way, the hammer in his hands like a silent threat. I used all my strength and struggled free from my parents' restraint. That was also when the police car stopped in front of my parents' house. They'd arrived, and that was also when I knew the truth would be revealed. 2 police officers got out and walked toward us. I stood up, brushed the dust off my clothes, and tried to regain my composure. The taller officer looked around and asked in a serious voice, "Who made the call?" Teresa stepped forward and said in a voice that was still shaking, "I did." The officer nodded and asked Teresa to tell them what had happened. My daughter took a deep breath, tried to stay calm, then started recounting the whole incident. This morning, when Teresa came to Grandpa and Grandma's house, Isaac was already there. When Teresa had just parked the car in the yard, Isaac appeared immediately by the car. He walked around the car, admiring it with greedy eyes. After Teresa got out of the car, Isaac turned to Teresa and said with a pleading voice, "Let me borrow it for a test drive." Teresa refused straight out at that point. "No way. You don't have a license and you're not old enough either. I can't give you my car." As soon as Teresa finished speaking, my dad appeared on the porch. He'd heard the whole conversation. He came down and told my daughter in a somewhat annoyed voice, "Teresa, don't be selfish. Let Isaac borrow it for a bit. He can drive. I've been teaching him to drive for 2 months now." Even though her grandpa had spoken up, Teresa didn't give in. Teresa replied with a firm voice, "No, it's not that I'm being selfish, but Isaac doesn't have a license. Letting him drive would be very dangerous." After that comment, my dad showed a cold attitude. He didn't say anything more, just silently turned around and went back inside the house. Teresa thought it was over. She had no idea that was just the beginning of the nightmare. Around 10 in the morning, when Teresa was helping Grandma prepare lunch in the kitchen, the familiar sound of a car engine rang out from outside. Teresa hurriedly dropped what she was doing and ran out to the porch. When she got to the porch, Teresa saw Isaac sitting in the driver's seat of her Honda Civic. In the passenger seat was my dad, who was instructing Isaac on how to start the car. Teresa screamed in a panicked voice, "Stop it, that's my car." My dad then said to Teresa through gritted teeth, "Don't be selfish, I'll supervise him." After saying that, he turned to Isaac and gave a short command, "Let's go." Isaac hit the gas and the car drove away. Teresa stood on the porch, helplessly watching her car disappear at the end of the road. Teresa could only pray that nothing would happen. 15 minutes later, the car appeared again, but this time one of the headlights was completely smashed. My dad slowly guided Isaac to park the car in the yard, then calmly got out as if nothing had happened. Teresa then screamed with a voice full of rage, "What did you do to my car?" My dad smiled coldly and replied indifferently, "Just a little accident. Isaac accidentally hit a trash can." Teresa couldn't believe what she was hearing. She screamed with a voice trembling with anger, "You're still laughing? You have to pay for my car." My dad changed his attitude immediately. He said to Teresa through gritted teeth, "Don't get smart with me. I'm your grandpa. You have car insurance, it won't cost anything. Don't make a big deal out of everything." Teresa wasn't scared at all. My daughter shouted with a voice full of determination. "I'm demanding that you fix my car and clear this up. You can't just take my car, then cause an accident and make me fix it." At this point, Isaac chimed in with a defiant expression. "You should feel lucky the car only got one headlight broken. I accidentally hit the trash can. I thought the airbag would go off, but it didn't. Lucky." My mom heard the commotion at that point and also ran out. Looking at the car, she somewhat understood what had happened. But instead of standing on the side of justice, she told my daughter in a fake, gentle voice, "Isaac didn't do it on purpose. Let's just let it go." Teresa couldn't stay calm at that point. Teresa shouted, "Then fix my car for me, and I'll let it go." That comment was like lighting the fuse on a bomb. My dad went crazy. He quickly ran into the house. Less than a minute later, he came back out with a baseball bat. Without any explanation, without any warning, he swung the bat at the Honda Civic. The sound of breaking glass, the sound of metal being hit, rang out shrilly. Teresa stood there, stunned, unable to believe what was happening before her eyes. My daughter called me right after that, but my parents had grabbed her phone and confiscated her car keys. While she was telling the whole story, the police officer took down her statement. As for me, my entire body was tense. I just wanted to go over to where my parents were standing and give them a beating. After Teresa told them everything, my parents and Isaac immediately denied it all. They accused my daughter of fabricating the story. My dad told the police officer in a voice full of fake sincerity, "Teresa drove the car herself, caused the accident herself, and damaged the car. She was scared her dad would scold her, so she made up the story about Isaac driving." Teresa then also shouted with a voice full of injustice, "I'm not lying." In light of the tense situation at that point, the police decided to take everyone to the station for additional statements and a more thorough investigation. At the police station, my parents continued to deny everything. They insisted that Teresa had caused the accident herself and fabricated the story to blame Isaac. They performed like professional actors, with the pained expressions of people being falsely accused. But just 30 minutes later, everything collapsed. Traffic cameras had captured clear footage. Isaac sitting in the driver's seat, my dad sitting in the passenger seat. Teresa's car is driving on the road with a 14-year-old kid behind the wheel. Additionally, camera footage captured the moment Isaac crashed into the roadside trash can. When the evidence was presented, my parents' faces went pale. They were silent, with nothing left to say. My dad finally had to bow his head and admit fault. He confessed to taking the car keys that Teresa had left in her jacket pocket to give to Isaac. And what happened after that was exactly what my daughter had told them. With an emergency search warrant, police quickly found the baseball bat my dad used to smash my daughter's car. The bat still had paint streaks from the Honda Civic on it. Knowing they could no longer deny it, my parents changed tactics. They asked to let the family resolve it among themselves. But the police didn't agree. This was no longer a simple family matter. My dad had stolen car keys, given the car to a 14-year-old without a license, let him drive on public roads, and then deliberately destroyed someone else's property. He would have to take responsibility for compensating for all the damages. In addition, the file would be sent to the prosecutor's office. If they determined the incident was dangerous in nature, my dad could face jail time. When they heard about the possibility of jail, my parents' attitude completely changed. The arrogance disappeared. In its place was panic and pleading. My mom turned to Teresa, and she said, "Teresa, we're your grandparents. Are you really going to send your grandparents to jail?" Teresa, at this point, looked straight into my mom's eyes and replied, "It's true that I had grandparents, but they died when they smashed my car." My daughter's answer made my mom and dad go pale. They stood there like two statues, unable to say a word. We left the police station at 5 in the afternoon, after completing all the paperwork. That evening, I took Teresa to a fancy restaurant to help my daughter forget the sadness of the day. After everything that had happened, I realized that our relationship with my parents would never be the same again. A crack had appeared, and it was too deep ever to heal. The next morning, at just 6 in the morning, my doorbell was ringing shrilly. I opened the door and saw Mario, my brother, standing in front of the door. Without waiting for me to invite him, Mario walked straight into the house and immediately said with a commanding voice, "You have to send a letter requesting not to prosecute Mom and Dad." I turned to face him and asked back, "Why should I do that?" Mario tried to control himself and replied, "Dad's 70 years old. He can't go to jail." I smiled coldly and replied, "When he smashed my daughter's car, did he think about his age? When he gave your son the car to drive, did he think about the consequences?" Hearing what I said, Mario's face turned red with anger. He shouted, "Isaac's just a kid. He didn't mean to." I shouted back in his face, "He's 14, doesn't have a license, driving on public roads. What if he'd caused an accident? Would you say he didn't mean to?" Faced with my valid argument, Mario was silent for a while, then he changed tactics. His voice became gentler as he said, "David, we're brothers. Mom and Dad raised us. You can't do this to them." I replied, "That's right, they raised us. But they've also favored you and your son our whole lives. You're the golden child. Isaac's the golden grandson. What about Teresa and me? What are we in their eyes?" Mario didn't say anything. He knew I was right. After a few seconds of silence, I continued speaking with a voice full of bitterness. "When Teresa graduated from high school with the highest grades in her class, did Mom and Dad come to the ceremony? No, because Isaac had a soccer game that day. When I was raising my daughter alone after my wife died, did Mom and Dad help at all? No. But when you quit your job, they gave you money to buy a new house. Tell me, where's the fairness?" Mario clenched his fists, his voice shaking. "Are you jealous?" I shook my head and replied with a tired voice, "No, I'm not jealous. I want my daughter to be treated fairly. And yesterday, they didn't do that." The argument lasted almost 20 minutes. Finally, I asked him with a cold voice, "Are you going to get out of my house?" He looked at me with eyes full of hatred and replied, "I'm not leaving. What are you going to do about it?" After that comment, I held up my phone for him to see. On the screen, the number 911 was displayed, ready to call. Mario hesitated for a moment. He looked at the phone, then looked at me. Finally, he turned around and walked out the door. He slammed the door hard and cursed continuously. Vulgar words rang out in the quiet morning. But I didn't care. I just stood there, looking at the closed door, and felt a strange relief. From that day, I knew that the relationship between me and Mario was also over. There was nothing left to hold on to. 2 days after Mario's visit, something else happened. In the afternoon, when I was sitting in the living room with Teresa, the doorbell rang again. I opened the door and stood frozen. In front of me were almost 10 people. They were relatives close to my parents. They'd heard about my determination to sue my parents, so they came to mediate. An uncle stepped forward and spoke with a solemn voice. "David, we came here to talk about what happened with your parents. I didn't invite them into the house." I leaned against the door frame and asked, "What's there to talk about?" The uncle continued, "Your dad was wrong, but he's an older man. You should be understanding and drop the charges." I silently listened to them talk. They took turns trying to persuade me, from logic to emotion. They mentioned family tradition, forgiveness, and letting things go. But no one mentioned Teresa. No one asked how my daughter felt. No one cared about the fear and hurt she had to endure. After they finished talking, I didn't respond right away. Instead, I walked to my car, opened the trunk, and took out the hammer. I turned back to face the crowd and told them, "If everyone here agrees to let me smash all your cars without paying for damages, I'll send a letter to the prosecutor's office asking to drop the charges." No one said anything after my comment. They looked at each other awkwardly. Finally, the uncle, who was acting as the representative, sighed and said, "David, you're being too extreme." After that comment, they got in their cars one by one and left. No one said another word. I stood there, watching the convoy disappear at the end of the road, feeling both lonely and extremely relieved. 1 month later, the trial took place. The trial lasted almost 3 hours. Evidence was presented, from traffic camera footage to witness statements, to the baseball bat that still had paint streaks from the Honda Civic. My dad kept his head down throughout the trial. He didn't look at me, nor did he look at Teresa. He just sat there like a shadow, old and tired. After 3 tense hours, the judge delivered the verdict. My dad was sentenced to 2 years in prison. He had to cover all the costs of fixing Teresa's car, as well as compensation for emotional distress, a total of almost $50,000. In addition, a restraining order was issued. My parents weren't allowed to come near my daughter unless they had my daughter's permission. When the judge read the sentence, my mom sobbed. My dad was silent, no reaction, but I could see his shoulders shaking. At the end of the trial, when Teresa and I walked past my family, they kept their heads down silently. Only Mario stood up and shouted in my face, "Are you satisfied, you monster? You sent your own dad to jail." I stopped, turned to look at him, and smiled back, very satisfied. If I were the judge, I would have given him life. After that comment, I took my daughter's hand and walked away. Mario's cursing rang out behind us, but I didn't turn back. I said what needed to be said. The rest didn't matter anymore. When we got to the parking lot, Teresa stopped and looked at me. My daughter asked with a gentle voice, "Do you regret it, Dad?" I thought for a moment and replied, "No. I don't regret protecting you, but I'm sad that things had to come to this." Teresa nodded and squeezed my hand tight. We got in the car and drove away, leaving behind a completely shattered relationship. 1 month after the trial, our lives gradually returned to normal. But I knew we couldn't stay here forever. One evening, when the two of us were sitting having dinner, I asked her with a serious voice, "Teresa, I'm thinking about selling this house and moving to another state. What do you think?" Teresa looked up at me. My daughter nodded immediately and said, "I agree, Dad. I want to leave here too." I was surprised by her quick agreement. I asked further, "Don't you want to think about it more?" Teresa shook her head and told me with a voice full of determination, "No need, Dad. But I have one request. Let's leave quietly, okay, Dad? I want our new place to be kept secret so no one knows. I'm scared Grandpa and Grandma will find us later." Hearing her say that, my heart sank. My daughter was only 17 and already had to be afraid of her own grandparents. Pain welled up inside me. I replied with a firm voice, "I agree. We'll keep it secret." Hearing my promise, my daughter smiled. Just 1 month later, we sold that house and moved to a new state 2,000 miles away from the old place. We didn't tell anyone, and we didn't leave our new address for anyone in my family. Life after that was truly peaceful and happy days. No more annoying calls from relatives. No more judgmental looks from acquaintances. We started over from scratch, just the two of us. And that was enough. 1 year has passed. Teresa's now 18, a freshman at a college near home. My daughter has matured significantly, not just in appearance but also in character. She's more confident, more assertive, and always carries a resilience that I'm incredibly proud of. I found a new job here. I took a management position at a sports shoe manufacturing company with a pretty good salary. The work isn't too stressful, allowing me to have more time for my daughter. As for my parents, they have no idea where we moved. Occasionally, I still get messages from Mom. The content is always pleading for forgiveness and inquiring about our whereabouts. Mom's most recent message read, "Where are you and Teresa? I'm so worried about the two of you. Let me apologize." I still read those messages but never reply. I don't block the number because I want my mom to be still able to contact me, but she'll never hear my voice or see Teresa and me again. As for my dad, he's been serving his sentence for a year. I heard he's very regretful about what he did. A distant relative called and told me about it in a recent phone call. He's aged a lot, his health has declined, and he always asks about Teresa and me. As for Mario and his family, they're also paying the price for their excessive spoiling. 3 months ago, I heard Mario let Isaac drive his car on the road again after it begged him. Apparently, they didn't learn any lesson from what happened. The consequences this time were much more serious. Isaac crashed into a man crossing the street. The victim was seriously injured and had to stay in the hospital for months. The compensation Mario had to pay was almost $800,000. He had to sell his house, use up all his savings, and even had to borrow money to pay compensation. When I heard this news, I had to admit that I was genuinely happy. All of them are reaping the consequences of their own actions. Not because I cursed them, but because that's the inevitable law of life. Through this story, I've learned 3 important lessons, and I would like to share them with you. The first lesson: favoritism in the family is a silent poison. It doesn't kill anyone immediately, but it gradually destroys all relationships. If you're a parent, remember that every child deserves to be loved equally. The second lesson: a father's responsibility is to protect his children. If the grandparents themselves are the ones harming your child, you still have to stand up and protect your child. The third lesson: sometimes, leaving is the best choice. I used to think family was everything, but life taught me that's not always true. When I shared this story in a family drama group, I received a range of mixed opinions. Many people said I did the right thing. They supported my decision and praised Teresa for her courage. But some people said I was too selfish and cruel for sending my dad to jail. They said that anyway, he was the one who gave birth to me and raised me. They told the family that they need forgiveness, not punishment. What about you? Do you think I'm cruel? And if you were in my situation, what would you do? Please feel free to leave your opinion in the comments below the story. If this story touched your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, and share the story. Thank you for following this long story. See you again in the following stories. What would you do if your dad grabbed a chair and smashed the car you bought for your 16-year-old son right in front of your kid on his birthday? I saved for 2 whole years, 12 grand, to buy my son a car for his 16th birthday. But just 5 minutes after the gift arrived, my parents demanded that the kid give up the car to my aunt, simply because she needed it for work more than he did. The moment I tried to protect my son's gift, an impulsive act of rage from my dad threw our entire family into chaos. And what my grandma did next made them pay a price nobody saw coming. Before I delve into the details of this story, I would like to thank you for taking the time to listen to my story today. I hope you have a great day. Hello everyone, I'm Marcus, 42 years old, and I own a small auto parts shop in suburban Detroit. The story I'm telling today happened 6 months ago, on my son Jalen's 16th birthday. I got divorced 8 years ago. Since then, the two of us have been living in a small 2-bedroom apartment on Gresham Avenue, about 20-minute drive from downtown Detroit. Jalen is the thing I'm most proud of in this world. The kid's smart, gets good grades, and he's so quiet that sometimes I have to ask him 2 or 3 times before I know what's going on at school. He never asks for anything. When his classmates show off their new shoes or the latest phones, Jalen stays quiet and continues with his homework. I left my parents' house at 18 with $200 in my pocket. Nobody helped me with a single penny. I built everything from scratch with my own 2 hands, from washing cars for hire to opening my own parts shop. My parents, Glenn and Diane, along with my sister, Kelsey, have been living with my grandmother, Ruth, for the past 14 years. They lost their house because of mounting debt. 14 years without paying a dime in rent, not covering a single utility bill. But if you ask them, they'll tell you it's family privilege. Pretty funny, right? My dad's the type of guy who, when he walks into a room, the air gets thick, hot-tempered, constantly yelling, and he's always played favorites with Kelsey. Since I was little, I knew that in his eyes, I'd never measure up to my sister. Kelsey gets whatever she wants, but for me it was figure it out yourself, you're the man. And the relationship between Jalen and his grandparents? They rarely remember their grandson's birthday. To them, Jalen might as well not exist. It wasn't until last year's birthday that I realized the truth. All the love in that family flows in one direction only, toward Kelsey. Last spring, Jalen won first place in the Michigan State Science and Engineering competition and was accepted into the STEM program at Cass Technical High School. In that moment, I knew I had to do something to let my kid know that I'm really proud of him. I chose to throw his 16th birthday party at Grandma's house because my apartment was too small, and Grandma Ruth suggested it would be a good chance for my son to bond with the family. I agreed because I trusted her. I never imagined that decision would cause me to watch my father become someone I no longer recognized. The party was simple in my grandma's backyard on Oakwood Drive. Grilled meat on the charcoal grill, a few cases of beer in ice buckets, sodas for the kids, and that chocolate cake Jalen's loved since he was little. About 20 people showed up, mostly Grandma's neighbors and a few of my son's school friends. My parents and Kelsey were there too, of course, since they live right in this house. Mom gave Jalen a card with a $20 bill, saying some generic birthday wishes like "Happy birthday, honey, keep studying hard and being good." Dad just nodded once and went back to talking with the neighbors. And Kelsey gave her nephew a baseball cap still with the $12 Target price tag on it, along with a smile as she'd just given him a fortune. Jalen politely thanked everyone, folded the 20, put it in his pocket, tried on the hat, and took it off. The kid wasn't sad, wasn't disappointed, wasn't anything. He was used to it. And honestly, I wasn't bothered anymore either. For the two of us, they were always like this, and we'd stopped expecting anything long ago. Throughout the whole party, I stood by the drink table, pretending to be busy with beer cans, but really, my eyes never left Jalen. The kid was sitting in the corner of the yard with his two best friends, laughing softly about something. His smile wasn't that bright, showy kind, but the sort of smile from a kid who's gotten used to not expecting too much. Grandma Ruth walked by, gently touched my shoulder, and whispered, "Is it time yet?" I looked at my watch. For 15. I nodded at her and pulled out my phone to text the delivery guy. About 10 minutes later, a loud engine rumbled from the top of the street. Everyone in the yard stopped talking and turned to look. A tow truck slowly pulled into the driveway, carrying the special gift I'd saved up for my son, entirely covered with a black tarp. After seeing the gift, Jalen stood up, looking confused as he looked over at me. I just smiled, walked toward the tow truck that had stopped in the middle of the yard. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. 2 years of saving. Everything is coming down to this moment. I climbed up, grabbed the corner of the tarp, took a deep breath, then yanked it down hard. A 2015 cherry red Ford Mustang sparkled in the afternoon sun. The glossy paint reflected the whole sky, as the car had just stepped out of a dream. I turned to my son, my voice catching as I said, "Happy birthday, Jalen." The kid stood frozen. His eyes went wide, looking at the car as the worker drove it down to park next to the old oak tree in the yard, then looked at me, then back at the car. A few seconds felt like hours. Then suddenly, he ran toward me, threw himself into my arms, and I could feel his shoulders shaking. Jalen's voice was choked up when he said to me, "Dad, is this real?" I don't know what to say. I hugged him tight, patted his back gently, and replied, "You deserve it, Jalen." Applause rang out across the yard. Grandma Ruth stood on the porch, wiping her eyes with her hand. A few neighbors whistled congratulations. Jalen let go of me and walked toward the car, as if hypnotized. His hand touched the car body, stroking gently over the red paint, like he was afraid that if he felt too hard, everything would disappear. In that moment, seeing my son's bright smile through my own tears, I thought this was the happiest day of my life. Everything was worth it just for that smile. I didn't know that just 5 minutes later, that smile would be shattered. Literally. The applause hadn't even stopped when my mom cut in. She stepped forward, hands on her hips, looked at the red Mustang, then looked at me with eyes as if I just committed some terrible crime. Her voice was sour as vinegar when she said, "Marcus, you've got all this money to buy the kid a car, but you don't think about your sister?" I stood frozen for a few seconds, not because I was surprised, but because I couldn't believe she chose this exact moment to say that. Right in front of Jalen. Right in front of 20 guests. Jalen was still standing next to the car. I watched the smile on my son's face slowly fade away, like a candle being blown out. Before I could respond, my dad stepped up next to Mom, like two soldiers lining up, ready to attack. He looked at the car, then at me, then shook his head with that familiar contempt I'd seen for 40 years of my life. His voice was low and heavy when he spoke. "Your mother's right. Jalen's only 16. What does he know about driving? Kelsey is 24, and she has to take the bus to work every day. She needs this car more." I felt blood rushing to my face, but tried to breathe deep to stay calm. I looked straight into Dad's eyes and said each word clearly. "This is money I earned. This is a gift I bought for my son. It has nothing to do with Kelsey." My mom immediately raised her voice, as I just said something incredibly offensive. "You always only think about that boy. Kelsey struggled for 4 years at community college to get her degree. Now she's working for pennies, taking the bus like a second-class citizen. You're his brother, and you don't know how to help your sister." I almost laughed. Kelsey struggled for 4 years, graduated with a degree she's never used, and now she's waitressing at a bar 3 blocks away. Meanwhile, I work 60 hours a week raising my son alone, and somehow I'm the selfish one. Their words kept pouring out nonstop, like vultures tearing apart prey. They didn't see Jalen. They didn't care that the kid was standing right there, hearing every word, witnessing every moment. In that instant, I looked over at Jalen, and my son took a step back. I could see the change on his face clearly. From happy to confused to hurt. His eyes looked from grandpa to grandma, then to me, like he was trying to understand what was happening. But my family still wouldn't stop. Dad took another step toward me, pointing his finger straight at his son's face like he was scolding a bad kid. He shouted, "You're selfish. When you have money, you share it with family. Who do you think you are?" His words were like the last straw. I shot back, my voice cold as ice. "Share? You and Mom have lived off Grandma for 14 years without paying a dime in rent. Kelsey's 24 and still freeloading, still letting Grandma pay the utility bills. And you're standing here calling me selfish?" Dad's face turned bright red. He was about to say something, but before he could open his mouth, a small voice spoke up from behind me. Jalen looked at his grandparents, his voice shaky but clear when he said, "Grandpa, Grandma, today's my birthday." My mom whipped around, looked at her grandson with ice-cold eyes, like Jalen was a fly that had just buzzed past her face. She dropped a line like a slap right to the kid's face. "Be quiet. The adults are talking." I watched Jalen flinch as he'd actually been slapped. The kid went silent, eyes looking down at the ground, shoulders shrinking. He didn't cry, didn't argue. He just took another step backward, like he wanted to disappear from this place. Around us, the guests started whispering. I heard someone murmur, "Oh my God." On his birthday, a neighbor tugged his wife's hand, signaling they should leave. The air in the yard was thick enough to choke on. Grandma Ruth sat quietly on her plastic chair in the corner of the porch, watching everything. She didn't say anything, but I could see her eyes looking at her son with something that wasn't disappointment, but deeper than that, like she was waiting for something. The tense silence stretched for a few seconds. I thought everything would stop there. I thought my parents had said enough, and we could continue the party in awkward silence. I was wrong. Kelsey, who'd been standing silently watching like a cat stalking prey, suddenly spoke up. She looked at the Mustang, then looked at me with a cold smile and said, "Marcus, if you're really a good brother, you'll let me borrow this car. Just borrowing, that's all." As soon as the words left her mouth, Kelsey acted in a way that made everything spiral out of control. Kelsey didn't say another word. She turned around and walked straight toward the Mustang parked next to the oak tree. That's when I realized my mistake. After the delivery worker drove the car down from the tow truck, I'd left the keys in the ignition because I thought I'd let Jalen sit in it and get a feel for it later. The car was parked right in the middle of the yard, front end facing the gate, with a clear path leading straight out to Oakwood Drive, a perfect position to drive away at any moment, and Kelsey knew it. She opened the car door in a flash, slid into the driver's seat, as this car had always been hers. The door locks clicked, and my heart dropped to my stomach. I rushed over, banged my hand on the window, and yelled, "Kelsey, open the door. This is my son's car." Kelsey turned to look at me through the glass and flashed a smile cold as ice. She spoke through the window, her voice terrifyingly calm. "You've got 12 grand, go get another one. I need this one more. Besides, I really like this red color." Then she turned the key. The Mustang's V8 engine roared to life in the quiet afternoon, like a beast that had just been awakened. My mom ran over, but not to stop her. She stood next to the car door, tapped on the window, and cheered like she was supporting her favorite team. "Kelsey, you're doing the right thing. Just drive off. Don't let Marcus bully you." I stood frozen for a second, my brain like it had stopped working. There are things that even when you witness them with your own eyes, you still can't believe. Then, without thinking, my feet moved automatically. I ran around to the front and stood right in front of the car's hood. I don't know what I was thinking at the time. Maybe I wasn't thinking at all. I just knew I couldn't let my sister take away what I'd saved 2 years for my son. Not today. Not like this. Kelsey honked the horn loudly. The car horn's piercing sound echoed through the neighborhood. She yelled through the car window, "Marcus, move." I'm not kidding. I stood still, my feet like they'd grown roots into the concrete. My eyes looked straight at my sister through the windshield. Two siblings who grew up together are now facing each other like strangers. From the corner of my eye, I saw Jalen standing about 10 steps away, his body frozen. His hands clenched, opened, then clenched again. His face went pale, eyes wide, watching the scene in front of him. Jalen's voice choked when he called to me. "Dad." Kelsey pressed the gas lightly. The car inched forward a few inches. The front bumper almost touched my knees. The whole yard screamed. Mr. Thompson, the neighbor who lived 3 houses down, ran over and yelled, "Lady, stop right now. Are you crazy?" His wife had pulled out her phone. I didn't know if she was calling someone or recording a video. And then, I saw my son running toward me. Jalen rushed through the crowd and ran to stand next to me. His shoulder touches mine. Father and son standing together in front of the rumbling car. His hand was shaking. I could feel it, but his feet didn't falter. Jalen's voice trembled when he said to me, "I'm standing with you, Dad." My throat tightened up. I grabbed my son's hand and squeezed it tight. His hand was ice cold, but it gripped mine really tight. Tyler, Jalen's best friend, also stepped forward to stand behind the two of us. The kid was a head taller than Jalen. His face bright red with anger, turned to look at Kelsey and shook his head. "I can't believe this. Is she really gonna do this?" My mom screamed, her voice shrill. "Jalen, get out of there right now. This is adult business. You have no right to interfere." Jalen didn't turn around. He stood straight, eyes looking directly at Aunt Kelsey through the car window. For the first time in his life, I saw my son not bow his head to this family. Around us, everything was chaos. Several neighbors pulled out their phones to record, while others shouted to call the police, and some tried to push in and intervene. 10 seconds passed. 20 seconds. Kelsey still sat in the car, hands still on the steering wheel, foot still lightly pressing the gas, making the engine growl threateningly. Nobody moved. Then I heard familiar footsteps, heavy ones behind me. My dad was walking over. I watched my dad charge over like a storm. He grabbed my arm, yanked me hard to one side, then turned to grab Jalen's shirt to drag him away from his position. He roared, "Move! Let Kelsey go!" But my son and I didn't back down. Without thinking, I shoved him away, hard. For the first time in my life, I did that to my father. He staggered back 2 steps, eyes wide, looking at me like he couldn't believe what had just happened. That moment was the most significant turning point of my life. The first time I directly confronted my family. I didn't do it out of anger, not out of pride. I did it because I wanted my son to see that his dad was ready to stand up and protect him, no matter who was on the other side. And right in the middle of that tense moment, Grandma Ruth stood up from her plastic chair in the corner of the porch. For the first time that afternoon, she spoke up. She walked over, slowly but decisively. Her voice was low and clear. "Everyone, stop. This has gone too far." My dad whipped around, his face bright red with anger. He looked at his mother and roared, "You're old. Sit down. This is our business." Grandma Ruth stopped walking. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, looking at her son with eyes I couldn't read, silent, cold, as if she were looking at a stranger. Her silence only made my dad more furious. He turned back, looked at me and Jalen, who were still standing in front of the car. The rage in his eyes flared even more violently. He pointed his finger at my face and yelled, "You dare push your father? You're teaching your son to go against his grandfather?" I looked straight into his eyes, my voice calmer than I expected. "I'm protecting my son's property. That's not defiance." My answer was like pouring gasoline on fire. My dad ground his teeth, turned toward the Mustang, thinking something, then stepped over and yanked hard on the door handle. The door was still locked. Kelsey still sat inside, eyes wide, looking at Dad like she didn't know what to do. He banged his hand on the car window and yelled, "Open the door! Kelsey, open it now!" Kelsey panicked and unlocked it. My dad jerked the car door open, grabbed her arm, and pulled her out. Kelsey stumbled and almost fell, screaming, "Dad, what are you doing?" I thought he'd stop there. I thought pulling Kelsey out of the car would calm his anger down. I was wrong, completely wrong. Instead of calming down, my dad stood there, breathing heavily, his eyes scanning the area as if he were searching for something. Then he saw it. A gray folding metal chair was lying next to the party table, about 5 steps away. He walked over and picked up the chair. My heart stopped beating. I yelled, "Dad, stop." My dad didn't answer, didn't look at me, didn't look at anyone. He raised the chair high and slammed it straight into the Mustang's windshield. The sound of breaking glass rang out in the afternoon, piercing and cold. Jalen screamed and stepped back. I rushed over to hug my son, pulling him into my arms and shielding him from the cold. But my dad wasn't done. He raised the chair a second time and smashed it into the side window. A third time, he slammed it down on the hood. The sound of metal hitting metal rang out deafeningly. I let go of Jalen and rushed to try to grab Dad's hands, but he shoved me down onto the ground. My knees hit the concrete, sharp pain shooting through. When I looked up, my dad had hit it 2 more times. The red Mustang I'd saved for 2 years was now unrecognizable. The windshield cracked completely, the side window shattered, and the hood was dented deeply with marks from the metal chair legs. Finally, my dad threw the chair to the ground. The sound of metal hitting concrete rang out like a period at the end of a sentence. He stood there, chest heaving, sweat streaming down his face. Then he turned to look at me with victorious eyes, flashed a cold smile, and said, "No more car. Let's see what you can do to me." The whole yard went dead silent. The guests stood frozen, their jaws dropped, unable to believe what they'd just witnessed. I turned to look at Jalen. My son stood there, eyes looking at the destroyed car, then at his grandfather, then down at the ground. His shoulders shook, but I knew it wasn't from fear. It was something breaking apart inside. Faith in family, in the people who shared the same blood. Everything was crumbling into pieces. While everyone else still stood stunned, Grandma Ruth remained in her spot, looking at her son without blinking, like she couldn't believe the truth before her eyes. Glenn stood in the middle of the yard, the smile still on his lips like he'd just won a battle. Looking at that man in that moment, childhood memories suddenly came flooding back in my mind, like an old and painful film reel. When I was 13, he threw my bicycle into the middle of the yard just because I came home 30 minutes late. I had to walk the whole way because the chain fell off, but he didn't care. I'd worked all summer helping neighbors cut grass to save up for that bike. He threw it into the street, the wheels bent and warped, and he stood looking at me with the same look he had now. When I was 17, he smashed the first flip phone I'd saved up my part-time job money to buy, just because Kelsey was only 7 at the time, crying and demanding that she get one too, and I wouldn't give in. And now he stood there with the same attitude. My dad always believed he could do anything in this family without anyone daring to fight back. He was the man of the house, and in his mind, that meant he had the right to destroy whatever he wanted. But this time he was wrong. Police sirens wailed from a distance, then grew louder. That piercing sound cut through the tense atmosphere in the yard. Right then, Grandma Ruth spoke, her voice strangely calm. "Finally. I've been waiting forever." My dad whipped around to look at Grandma, and his face went pale in an instant. He looked at the phone in her hand, then looked toward the street where blue and red lights were flashing closer. It turned out that while Jalen and I were standing in front of the car, she'd quietly called the police. It turned out her silence wasn't because she was weak or scared. She remained silent, letting the law take its course. My dad rushed toward her, his voice roaring. "What did you do? This is family business." Grandma Ruth put her phone in her pocket, looked straight into her son's eyes with terrifying calm. She said, each word clear, "You just told me I'm old and to sit down and be quiet. Fine. Now watch what I can do." The police car stopped right in front of the gate. 2 officers got out, their eyes quickly scanning the scene in the yard. But my dad wasn't panicked at all. He walked straight toward the 2 officers, his face switching to that fake friendly look I'd seen him use 100 times. He raised his hands, his voice full of confidence. "Hey, there's a misunderstanding here. Nothing serious is going on." The salt and pepper-haired officer looked around the yard, his eyes stopping at the beat-up Mustang. He asked, "Who called 911? My grandma stepped forward, her voice calm. "I did. This man just used a chair to smash that car." My dad laughed loudly, waving his hand as if to brush off a joke. He pointed toward Jalen and me, his voice smooth. "Listen, my son and his kid blocked the front of the car, wouldn't let my daughter drive away. I was trying to resolve a family matter. My mother's old. She doesn't understand what's happening." The officer looked at my dad, then looked at the car. He walked over and carefully observed everything. He turned back and asked, "You resolve family matters by damaging other people's cars?" My dad still tried to stay calm, replied, "This car is a gift within the family. My son bought it for his kid, but basically it belongs to the whole house." I stepped forward, pulled out my wallet, and handed the officer the car registration. I said, "The car's registered to my son, Jalen Webb, 16 years old. I bought it and registered it in his name as a birthday gift. Today's his birthday." The officer looked at the paperwork, then at Jalen standing trembling next to me, and finally at my dad. His expression completely changed. In that moment, my dad started losing his cool. He raised his voice. "Hey, this is internal family business. You people have no right to interfere." The salt and pepper-haired officer shook his head. "Sir, destroying other people's property is against the law, whether it's family or not, especially when it's property belonging to a minor." My mom rushed over, tears streaming down her face, her voice shrill. "My husband was just angry for a moment. Please have mercy." But Grandma Ruth cut in, her voice cold as ice. "He hit the car 5 times. I counted. Every time was deliberate." The second officer had walked around the yard, taking pictures of the car, the metal chair still lying on the ground, and the scattered glass fragments. He nodded to his partner. Now my dad started really panicking. He turned to Grandma, his voice suddenly switching to pleading. "Mom, tell them. Say you were mistaken. Please." Grandma Ruth looked at her son. Her eyes didn't blink. "I worked 32 years at the shipyard, faced off with 500 big tough men. I never begged anyone for anything. Don't you go begging me either." The salt and pepper-haired officer stepped forward, pulling out handcuffs. His voice rang out steadily. "Glenn Webb, you're under arrest for willful destruction of property. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The sound of handcuffs clicking shut rang out in the yard. The sound of metal hitting metal, cold and final. My dad was led to the police car, his face white as a sheet, his eyes still looking back at Grandma with disbelief. My mom cried and ran after them all the way to the gate. Kelsey stood frozen in the middle of the yard, her face empty. Grandma Ruth turned to Jalen and me, her voice softening. "Go home. I'll call you later." The guests left one by one in silence. Tyler walked by and gently patted Jalen's shoulder, without saying a word. His eyes looked at his friend with understanding. That night, my dad was held at the police station on Michigan Avenue, and I sat in the living room of our small apartment, watching my son sit motionless on the couch. Jalen didn't cry. He didn't say a single word the whole way home. He just sat in my old pickup truck, eyes staring into space, like some part inside him had shut off. And I knew that was scarier than tears, because for the first time in his life, my son truly understood what his grandfather thought of him. And that truth hurt more than any broken glass. After that day, with all the clear evidence, my dad had no way to deny it. During the 2 weeks waiting for court, every time I looked at Jalen sitting silently by the window, my heart clenched. The kid still went to school, still did his homework, still ate properly. But something in his eyes had changed. I never imagined that the moment I thought would make my son the happiest would become the memory that hurt him the most. However, perhaps some things can't be salvaged. Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after the birthday, I stood in the Wayne County courtroom. My dad was charged with willful destruction of property, with damages over $1,000, which is a felony that could carry up to 5 years in prison. His lawyer attempted to secure leniency, arguing that this was a family conflict and that he had lost control in a moment of anger. But the judge wasn't buying that story. Glenn Webb received 18 months of probation, was required to perform 200 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay full damages for the car. When the judge read the sentence, my dad turned to look at me. His eyes were full of resentment, like I was the one at fault, like I was the one who'd hurt him. Not a bit of remorse, not a bit of shame. My grandma didn't come to court. She'd said what needed to be told to the police, and for her, that was enough. But I had no idea that the house my family had been staying in for nearly 15 years was no longer theirs. Grandma had given them 30 days to move out. No matter how much my parents begged, cried, or blamed others, she wouldn't change her decision. I wasn't there to witness it, but I could imagine what it must have been like. With my parents' meager pension and Kelsey's bar waitressing job, they'd struggle to find new housing. But that wasn't my problem anymore. As for me, during the months after, I tried to talk more with my son. And Jalen, he was always like that, understanding in a way that broke my heart. One afternoon, father and son were sitting on the couch, eating pizza, when he suddenly turned to look at me. His voice was calm as he said, "Dad, when I grow up, I'll make my own money to buy a car. Don't think about that day anymore." I looked at my son, my throat tightening. Before I could say anything, Jalen continued, his eyes still looking at the cooling slice of pizza. "I don't need a car. I need you to be healthy." He didn't mention his grandparents or Aunt Kelsey. He only talked about great-grandma, asked about her health, reminded her to eat well, and called her at least once every week. Maybe to Jalen, Grandma Ruth was the only person in this extended family who truly loved him. 3 months after the trial, Grandma Ruth called me to meet her. When I walked into the empty house, she was sitting at the kitchen table. In front of her was a piece of paper pushed toward me. It was a deposit receipt for a 2024 red Ford Mustang. I looked at the paper, then at her, not understanding what was happening. She said to me, "I sold the house for $165,000. I used part of it to buy a new car for the kid. This is the gift I want to give my great-grandson." I shook my head, tried to refuse, but my grandma just smiled, one of those rare smiles I seldom saw. She patted my hand gently and said, "I'm moving to Sunrise Nursing Home in Dearborn. The remaining money is enough for me to live comfortably. I've lived enough, Marcus. That money is for the kid's future." I was about to say something else, but she cut me off. Her eyes softened as she looked at me. "I want Jalen to know he deserves more than this, more than what this family ever gave him." When I brought Jalen to see her and showed him the receipt, for the first time in 3 months, I saw my son's eyes well up with tears. He hugged his great-grandma tight, his voice choking. "Grandma, I don't know what to say." Grandma Ruth patted my son's back gently, whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "You don't need to say anything. You need to live well. That's all I need." And my parents and Kelsey? They moved to a 1-bedroom apartment in Brightmoor, one of Detroit's most run-down neighborhoods. They called Grandma a crazy old woman, said she was senile, and said Marcus was manipulating her. They don't know what she did for Jalen, and I'll never tell them. And today, 6 months after that fateful day, my son and I have returned to our everyday lives. I still work at the parts shop, and Jalen continues to attend school, participating in science and engineering competitions. The kid's on track to get his driver's license to drive the red Mustang parked in our apartment complex's garage. I don't know what the kid thinks every time he looks at that car, but maybe it's the most precious gift of his life. In the letter he wrote to great-grandma, the kid wrote that he would use the car very carefully, take it with him on his future journey, and make her proud. As for my grandma, after moving to the Sunrise Nursing Home, she has had a more comfortable life. Maybe she was sad to leave the house she'd been attached to her whole life, but that strong woman proved to the entire family that love doesn't need to tolerate injustice. We visit her every week, not because of the gift, but because she's the only family my son and I have left. None of us mentions my parents or Kelsey anymore, and there'll be people we won't see again, because we know some wounds don't need to heal through forgiveness. That's the end of my story. Before I close, I want to leave you with this. Money can buy many things, but it can't buy respect. And family, sometimes it's not the people who share your blood, but the people who are willing to stand up and protect you. Do you think I was wrong to let the police arrest my father? And if you were Jalen, would you forgive them to keep the word family? Please feel free to leave a comment to share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the following stories. Thanks for listening. I look forward to seeing you next time.